there's 10 questions that I know sellers need to be prepared to answer. And it's 10 questions that if you're thinking about buying a business, you really need to ask these questions. And so I thought we'd go over them. I thought it would be something interesting to be able to do. And so I've got the top 10 questions an owner selling their business will be asked, and let's get started on those. And I think you'll appreciate some of these questions. Some of them might surprise you. So, in no particular order, but the top two are one of the first questions I'm asked every time. And the first one is, why are you selling your business? And let me tell you something. It is important that you acknowledge why you're selling, the motivation of why you're selling. A buyer really is interested in. That matters to them. You would say, well, why do you care? I've got a business, I've got a price. To them, your motivation, it says a couple of things. One of them is they want to make sure you're genuinely sincere and you're not playing with them just to see if you can get a good price. If you can't get a good price, then you're not going to sell. And almost all of my clients say that. But the truth is, a buyer doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear, I want to sell, and this is why I want to sell. And I'm surprised how many sellers don't have an answer for that. So come up with one. If you're working with me, I'm going to help you make sure you clearly define exactly what that is. Because it's not always, I'm ready to retire, right? I mean, that's a common answer just because most people, when they sell their business, are ready to retire. But that's not the only reason why to do that. And listen, it's okay to say, I'm tired of doing this. I want to do something else. It's all right to say that. And so think through that, because I can assure you it is sort of the defining start to relationship with a buyer. Number two, can I see your financial statement for the last 3 years? I don't know why, but it is one of the hardest things for Julie and I to do, is to get our sellers to understand that this is going to be one of the first questions a buyer asks. Surprise, surprise. They want to know what it looks like. It's kind of like if you're getting ready to sell their house, they're going to say, let me see what the kitchen looks like. I mean, you have to have your finances in order. Now, we did a tip on this earlier in the year. It's such an important thing. We can help you do that. We got bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs that can help you with that. But you got to have them in order, because it really is important. It's kind of like if you're trying to sell your business, you got to vacuum the carpet. You got to clean the windows. You got to make sure the kitchen is cleaned up. And that's what they're asking for when they say, let me see your financial statement. So that's going to be first or second question I ask. Here's the next one. Who are the biggest competitors that you have? If you tell me we don't have any competitors, I'm telling you now, I bet I can find 3 or 4 quickly just by going to the Google. And you need to understand that a buyer wants you to be genuine and say, here are the 3 competitors. Here's why I struggle to compete them, and here's why I beat them in these areas. It's really important to do that. Next thing, what are the trends in your industry? I will help you with this as a business broker, but I am amazed how many people do not know the long-term trends that are happening and short-term trends that are happening, and they'll try and make something up, which tells me they can't see the forest for the trees. It's really important that you understand where your industry is heading. Most of the time, you can find this out by going to your industry associations, and they'll help you with this. It's one of the reasons why I like franchising, because they do that for you. They keep you on top of the market, and we'll talk to Don about that later on today. But you've got to know your competitors, and as an independent company, that's much harder to do, but very important to do. Number 5. What can I do to increase sales and profit? Listen, I'm not saying you're going to do it, and I'm certainly not the guy to tell you how to run your business better, right? That's not what I do. What you need to be able to do is have this list of things that have worked and that haven't worked, and be positive through this process. And as you hand them ideas and concepts, they will discern which one of those are helpful. They, being the buyer, will discern how that can help them and how the implementation of some of these ideas can make the business more profitable. Most small business people know what they need to do and choose not to do it, don't want to do it, or don't have the capital to make it happen. And that's okay. You know, I tell people all the time, and you've heard this from me many times, nobody is going to buy your business unless they think they can do something better than you. Period. It's not going to happen. They're not going to write the check unless they think they can do something better than you. This is the area where you get to say, hey, if you did A, B, and C, I think it would improve the value of your business. We do that on our confidential memorandum. We do it in the form of what we call a broker's opinion. So those are the top 5 questions people ask. Now let's go to number 6. Oh, this one pops up all the time. Will you finance part of the purchase price? It's a question that's coming. Sellers absolutely hate this question. They don't want to do it. They want cash and head to the beach or the mountains. Here's the reality. They're asking because there's no way somebody, meaning a third party, is going to finance your entire business without you contributing some piece of it to make the third-party financing company, bank, or whomever it is, and or the buyer comfortable. So you're going to have to finance some piece of your business to make everybody comfortable, because they cannot calculate the risk like they need to, because small business is constantly about making choices and decisions without having all the information. You help them by saying, I believe in you. Number 1, the buyer, I believe in you. Number 2, I think you can do this. Number 3, to the finance company, I'm willing to hold back 10% or 20% for a period of time, so that we can make sure that the buyer is successful, which makes the calculated risk less for the third-party lender and also for the buyer, because if you're willing to do that, they know you believe in your company. And so it's something you're going to have to give serious consideration to. Will you consider financing? Number 7, will you stay with the business for a period of time? You really want to always say yes to this question. The period of time is what you would negotiate. Most of the time, what I do successfully is come up with a consulting agreement, but it's advice and consent, and most of that can be by phone. So you could be at the beach, you could be in the mountains, you could be wherever you want to be, but take the phone call of the buyer and help them through, give them advice, send them emails, give them contacts and relationships. And once in a while, you might have to pick up the phone and call a client and kind of massage an issue or something like that. That's what I mean by a good transition period. I help them through that. Not hard to do. Most of my clients, they're very comfortable with that. They've got no problem trying to help the buyer succeed. So that was number 7. Will you stay on with the business for a while? Number 8, who knows that the business is for sale? Let me put it this way. If you're coming through me, nobody knows. Confidentiality is one of the top things that Julie and I take pride in. And in this world, confidentiality gets harder and harder. Julie and I do a very good job of that. It is extremely challenging and difficult to make sure that you are marketing a business and also not letting anybody know that that business is actually for sale. We do a nice job of that. We make them sign NDAs. This is one of the main reasons you want a broker, because if you didn't need a broker and this confidentiality, you might as well put a big old sign in front of your business or on your trucks and say, hey, come buy my business. So this is an important factor. Also, it's important for the buyer, because the buyer wants to discern when and how to tell clients, vendors, suppliers, employees, staff members, when there's been a transition. And so that's something you should negotiate, when to have this conversation with the buyer and the seller. Every business is different. Every industry is different. Every relationship with key employees is different. And that's something you need to have a conversation with. And I'll let you know, I've changed my opinion on that. It used to be, I tell Buyers and sellers, don't say a word until you've got check in hand and keys in your hand. But sometimes nowadays there's some key employees. They understand, they get it. They understand the owner is in a position where he needs to move on or she needs to do something different. And talking to them in advance sometimes is a good, healthy conversation. So we all will have those conversations and come up with a strategic, tactical way to answer this question. So it's a case-by-case basis. But until we all decide, we being the broker, the buyer, and the seller, nobody says a word, and we ensure that the buyers and sellers don't say anything about that. So, but that's an important question that we keep control of. Number 9, who will be negotiating with, and will that person be making the decision? That's an interesting question because buyers want to make sure they can create some leverage through the negotiation. They don't want a good cop, bad cop. They don't want, I got to talk to my wife. I got to talk to my husband. They don't want, let me see what my partner says. They don't want to do that. They're not going to let you do that on the front end. And so they're going to ask the question on the front end to confirm, are you the person I'm supposed to be talking with? Because, ma'am, if you're not the person I'm supposed to be talking with, then let's get everybody in the room. I'm not even going to put together a letter of consideration. And so, sir, if you're going to tell me you got to talk to your wife, then why don't you go talk to her right now, and then we'll get back together and have this conversation when we can all be meeting together. And so be prepared for that. Because they're not going to want to feel like that they're being played against or having to negotiate against themselves. Common standard stuff, but you'd be surprised how many buyers don't know that, and I help them with it, and or sellers, I'm prepping them in advance so that they can answer this question correctly and still have time to talk to their spouse about what they want to do. And number 10, what is your timetable? When do you want to sell? You know, the seller always says yesterday, and the buyer says, I need 3 months, right? And so what you try and do, and this is a great question. This is a shrewd question because timing is as much a negotiation tool as the amount of cash you have. I can't tell you how many times a buyer says, I'll close tomorrow, but I've got $2. I can't tell you how many times a seller will consider that, right? You know, and I'm joking, I'm being extreme. You know, matter of fact, I don't want to get in trouble with Julie because the other day I told Julie I want her to contact our client every single day. I was trying to be bold and set an example. She took me literally and started calling the client every single day. So when I make this statement, I want to be careful, right? I don't mean that specifically, but the point is you absolutely can use timing as a negotiating tool and leverage, and that's what this question is trying to do. It's a great question from a buyer. It tells me I probably got a pretty sharp buyer if they're asking that question. And the last thing I want to do for you, these are the top 10 questions buyers will be asked. Buyers are going to be asking sellers, and I gave you a bonus point here. It's because I am such a masterful, marvelous, spectacular, brilliant broker that I give you this bonus, and that is, it happens often. Be careful. There are many sort of double purposes when questions are being asked. I find it interesting. I like to tell people, be careful. This is kind of the Columbo type of question, right? Oh, by the way, I've just got one more question I want to ask you. No big deal, but is it okay, you know, if my sister-in-law sits in on the business on Tuesday, you know, no big deal. She'll just sit over in the corner or whatever it is. I made that up. But the point is, there'll be this last-minute question. I can assure you that question is probably the most important answer that they wanted out of all of the questions that they asked. So the last question is almost as important as the first. It's never the same question because it's always about the motivation of the buyer. That's why one of the things we do on the front end of the deal is define buyer profiles for sellers so we know what their expectations and motivations are. We as brokers will help you answer that question and warn you about the Columbo question that's coming. We actually won't let those come. One of the reasons Julie is one of the best in the business, she will require those questions to be in the form of emails, so you've got time to respond in kind by email. But that is a bonus question you need to be concerned about. And so I wanted you to be able to hear that. You just heard the top 10 questions buyers are going to ask sellers when they're considering buying a business.